Hello, GWRC 2021. My name is Duncan Elkins, and I'm at the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources at UGA in Athens, where you would be if this was a regular year. But since it's not, I'd like to talk to you virtually about the discovery and monitoring of an exotic loach in a tributary of the Middle Oconee River. Um, so, there's a lot of folks involved in this project that I should call out. First, there's me. I'm at the top of the list just because I'm presenting, not because this is all my work. And really, most of the credit for this work should go to Jordan Horvey, who was a senior last semester in my senior project class. And she was trying to characterize the fish assemblage above and below a little dam in the southern part of town uh, to see if it was perhaps a passage barrier. And Wes Guerin, a master's student at Warnell, was helping her out with that. And they turned up fish that they didn't recognize, and that was the start of our story. I should, before we get much farther, recognize Bryson Hilburn, who took some great pictures and did a lot of work to help us document our second sampling event. The other photos, including the drone shots here, are from Andrew Tucker, who's with Marketing and Communications with UGA. Um, and then there's a bunch of faculty on this project. Jay Shelton was also supervising Jordan's senior project. And Pete Hazelton and Marty Hamill are fisheries faculty here at Warnell. They jumped on to lend their expertise to different aspects of the project that we'll talk about in a minute. And Brian Shamblin is also on the Warnell faculty, and he is doing our genetics. So the site is Puritan Mill in the south part of Athens, Georgia. Actually, it's right on the border between Athens and between Athens, Clark County and Oconee County. So as we're looking at the dam here, that's Oconee County on the far side. The drone is hovering over the Athens side, and as you can see in this map here, the red square in the locator map is the site we're working at. Right there in that site, McNutt Creek and Barber Creek come together. Those are the little turquoise arms that you see in the aerial photo coming in from the north and the southwest. They join together in a little pool that's kind of the drowned mouth of those two streams. That is the reservoir of that run of river dam. And then the area highlighted in red on the aerial photo is, I believe, still called McNutt Creek until it runs into the Middle Oconee, which is the larger turquoise line there in the locator map. The Middle Oconee then runs in a little farther south with the North Oconee, and it's right near there that Jay Shelton supervised the modification of an old dam structure a couple years ago. I helped out with that project a little bit, and really that was the source of our interest in this site, is that it's sort of the next dam upstream on the Oconee system. And so, as I said, Jordan, you was part of a senior project team that was looking at various aspects of this particular site, including whether the dam structure was a fish passage barrier. And they were out electrofishing to characterize this assemblage and turned up something they didn't recognize. So they texted Jay, and Jay texted me, and I said, I'm pretty sure that's a cobitid, which is a Southeast Asian family of freshwater fishes. They look like kind of catfishes here, except that they're longer. And I'm not exactly sure which one that is. And he said, I think that's a weather loach. And Jay was right. Um, so we sort of scrambled the fisheries faculty and the interested students in the fish management class or the AFS fisheries subunit and went out about 2 weeks later. And because Jordan and Wesley had not found any of these fish above the dam, and we assumed that the dam is tall enough to be a real passage barrier for this particular critter, we were focused downstream of the dam. And as you can see, we fished about twice as far downstream as they had in their original sample. So what you can see, the bridge that we went under there is Macon Highway for anybody that's familiar with that sort of south part of Athens. And that is 441 off to the left below the intersection with the loop. So this is the dam at the upstream part of the site. It's a run-of-river dam. It's, I don't know, 6 or 8 feet above the water surface here, and it is easily waders deep at the bottom of that dam. It is not a structure with any, controls on it. It's run-of-river. It's not generating hydropower now. It's not providing any real flood control. Really, what this dam is doing is providing a comfortable white noise for the folks dining al fresco on the south bank, but it's also a real popular recreation spot. You may have heard it referred to as Redneck Beach in the student press here in Athens. Of course, it's not officially a park or anything. Everybody that goes there to swim is trespassing, but that doesn't mean they don't do it. And it's actually quite crowded when the weather is nice. Here's a shot looking up from almost the bottom of our sampling on that second day, and you can see that it was a great day to be in the field. The water was fairly low. The water was very clear, and you can get a sense of what this stream channel looks like. It's fairly broad. The water's fairly shallow. The bottom is very sandy with occasional patches of rock or other structure, submerged vegetation, dead wood, that sort of thing. This is a fairly impacted stream, um, but most of the streams in North Georgia are to one degree or another. It's moving a lot of sand still, even though this is probably a bedrock outcrop. That's, I assume, why the dam is where it is that there was historically a shoal there with enough rock sticking out for them to get a good footing for the dam. All in all, not a remarkable stream site. So let's talk about the fish that they found. The weather loach, Misgurnus anguillicaudatus. Anguillicaudatus means eel-tailed, and you can tell by the elongate body form of that fish why they named it that. It has other names in the trades, depending on whether you are an aquarist or an aquaculture person, but it gets called oriental weatherfish or dojo loach, weather loach. Um, Max size is about 30 centimeters, so a big one is almost a foot long. They are native to Southeast Asia, but you can see it's not just Southeast Asia. They get up almost all the way to southern Siberia, so they are fairly cold tolerant for what we can for a typical aquarium fish. They are habitat generalists in that they live not only in streams but also in still water, rice paddies, wetlands, lakes. Um, and when they do get captured in flowing water, they are in low flow, right, along the sides or in backwaters where they can get out of the current. They bury themselves in soft sediments or under vegetation mats, and I would say that's very consistent with where we found them at our site. And this map over here on the right has, in addition to the native range in blue, all the countries where this fish has been documented as an introduction in red. And you can see they're all over the place. Australia, in fact, has banned further import of them because of their escape and invasion risk. Um, Zooming in on the US, you can see that they have been recorded in almost 20 states, which is surprising. And we think that this is the first introduction or the first recorded capture in Georgia proper, although they get quite close to Georgia where they're found in the Coosa River system in Alabama. So as I said, we did 2 samples. Jordan and Wesley collected 15 Misgurnus and brought them back to the lab. Of those, the largest was about 16 1/4 centimeters and 21 grams. 2 weeks later, we went out and got another dozen. The largest fish we got were a little bit bigger than the biggest one that they got. The biggest one was about 17 1/2 centimeters or 24 grams. The average was about 15 centimeters or 15.4 grams. Now that's just 7 of the 12 that we captured that we euthanized for one reason or another, for the genetic samples or for the gut contents. But I would say in general, these fish were all pretty close to the same size, which may be a good thing because it indicates that there aren't multiple generations out there. The other fish assemblage that we documented at the site is pretty typical for this portion of the Oconee system. We had 6 minnows, 2 suckers, 4 catfish, including the margin mad tom, which is an itty bitty catfish compared to the snail bullhead, flat bullhead, and brown bullheads. We did get 1 isossid, that chain pickerel, mosquito fish, predictably, and then a pretty good handful of different bass and sunfish species, including spotted bass, warmouth bluegill, green sunfish, red bear sunfish, and the inevitable hybrid in a system like this, and two darters. So not too bad. And so why do we worry about weather loaches in this system? Well, Altamaha shiner is present in the Oconee system, and indeed was collected at this site, and that's a state-listed species. So whenever you have a T&E species in a site where you've also got an introduction, you have sort of a heightened level of scrutiny to be sure that a native fish that's already stressed in some way isn't getting a further insult from an introduced fish. But also we have bluehead chubs in this system, and bluehead chubs have a real keystone role in streams like this because they build rock nests. They pick up pebbles, rocks the size of a marble or even bigger, and pile them together into these nests that are the size of a manhole cover. That provides the only hard aerated substrate for them to spawn on in this otherwise sandy expanse. And not only will blueheads spawn on those nests, but a number of other minnows in the system will spawn on those same nests. And so there's certainly some worry that a fish like a weather loach that comes out at night, that's foraging along the bottom, feeling along with its little barbels, will come across a bluehead chub nest and pillage that nest, eat up all the fertilized eggs and embryos of not just the bluehead chubs, but a number of other native minnows. Also, we worry a little bit about direct interactions with the margin mad tom. This is visually kind of a fish built along the same lines as that weather loach in that it's long and streamlined. It also spends most of its time undercover. It's also nocturnal. It also feeds by using its barbels. And so we could anticipate, some more or less direct competition with the weather loach on the part of these little mad tom guys. Um, so our concerns, in a nutshell, are based on the fast reproduction of these weather loaches that has been documented in the literature and their efficient predation on insect prey. Lab studies have shown that they are quite effective at reducing macroinvertebrate numbers and biomass in these artificial streams, and the fact that they are pretty good dispersers. In their native range, they move up into wetlands seasonally. They move up into small streams seasonally, and those are life history characteristics that tend to make you a pretty good disperser as a fish. Based on those characteristics, we worry that they will outcompete native fishes for prey. They're all eating the same kinds of macroinvertebrates. And so if you add a new consumer to the mix, you're just slicing that bug pie a little thinner for everybody else. They may outcompete native fishes, particularly those mad toms for shelter, and they will interact with the native fish's spawning sites, perhaps not by spawning on them, but by preying on native fish's eggs and juveniles. So our research plan, we put our heads together on Microsoft Teams and came up with a couple of research questions that we could chase. First is this question of competition for insect prey. And so we started looking at the preserved specimens and trying to dissect out their GI tract and enumerate the gut contents. This is work that Pete Hazelton is doing, and God bless him, because it's sounding like it's more of a job than we anticipated at first. Marty is looking at age and growth on these fish, which means extracting the otoliths, little round bones out of the ear canals or in the skull of these fish. That get rings. Fish lay down rings on their otoliths, almost like a tree lays down rings in its trunk. And you can tell from the number and relative distance of those rings a little bit about how old the fish is and how much it grew during the seasons in which it laid down those otoliths. So this will help us ask questions like, how long have these fish been in the stream? Do we see a big change where they were growing slowly, perhaps in an aquarium, and then they were released into the stream and they started growing very quickly, or vice versa, right? Can we see a big change in their growth pattern that might indicate the introduction event? We're also coming at that introduction history from a genetic perspective, trying to see, are these fish all siblings? Are they the result of Are we capturing multiple family lines, which would indicate perhaps a whole bag of fish got dumped, or they've been dumped repeatedly, as opposed to a single event of a pregnant female, or a gravid female and a male, or something like that, that could be a more limited scope of introduction. And we're going to continue our electrofishing efforts seasonally to see if the spatial extent of the invasion changes. Can we collect fish downstream? Do we ever see them above the dam? And phenology. If we're picking up fish at different times of the year, we can dissect them and look at their ovaries, see if they're coming into breeding condition, and compare that to fish captured elsewhere. We do know that these fish are commonly available at retail outlets in Athens, and we're working with a couple of pet stores to get weather loaches from their stock. That gives us practice specimens for the dissection, but also reference samples for our genetics. Perhaps we'll be able to trace our fish back to a particular importer or wholesaler. And we've got some results coming back from the dissection. As I said, the gut contents are proving to be a challenge, but at least one of the specimens that we've dissected, this is Pete's work, had mature ovaries, which is a little surprising, since we thought that these were spring spawners, and we figured that they would be starting to spawn around April, and this fish was pretty much ready to go back before Christmas. Genetics results are starting to come in. This species appears to be a match to a Japanese aquaculture line of weather loaches. That line was originally from a Chinese source. We don't know what's happened to them in the interim, but the specimens that we have are distinct from one specimen collected from Poorhouse Creek in Alabama. That's an upper Coosa trib. And that was picked up by Brooke Fluker and Bernie Kuhaida. We're trying to get more genetic information from them, or at least from that population, to see just how much diversity is there and how it compares to what we're seeing in our population. Why are we concerned about this? Well, you may have heard about other fish introductions in Georgia. Flathead catfish make a lot of news because they get huge, and they have really done a number on the native fish in a couple of rivers where they have been introduced in the Atlantic drainages of the state. Snakeheads were all over the TV a couple of years ago when they were discovered in a wetland in Atlanta. And before that, swamp eels were discovered in a different wetland in Atlanta. And I don't really want to talk about the flatheads. We think that those get moved around by anglers. They are not non-native in the sense that the swamp eels, the snakeheads, and the weather loaches are, because flatheads are native to the Mississippi drainage. They just get moved around by fishermen in the States. But these swamp eels and snakeheads and weather loaches are all Asian fishes, all able to breathe atmospheric air, which may give them a little bit of a leg up in these somewhat degraded systems like in Atlanta, or just downstream of a dam. Particularly in areas where it gets real hot in the summer, and the dissolved oxygen content of the water gets kind of low. Now, snakeheads and flatheads are worrisome because they are big predators, and they are showing up in systems where the prey fish are not evolved to look out for them, right? Swamp eels and weather loaches are not necessarily going to grow big and eat everything in the system, but that doesn't mean that they don't have any impacts, and their indirect impacts can be no less pervasive and no less bad news for the native fish should they get established more widely. I would commend to you the page that DNR has put together at georgiawildlife.com/ANS, where they've got information on these three species and a number of other fishes that have been picked up in the wild in Georgia that shouldn't be there, but also some inverts and some plants in Georgia waters, both fresh and marine. So all this comes down to a question of how did these fish get here? And we think that they were probably pet fish that somebody turned loose. That's not unusual that when the apartments turn over in Georgia, that there's cats or dogs or apparently fish that get turned loose. And I guess the message I would leave you with is if you're going to take responsibility for keeping an animal alive, that's a lifetime commitment. And if you can't keep it, you need to find someone who can. And if not, then it's on you to put it down humanely. As our friend Ned Stark would say, the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. So if you decide that you can't have an animal anymore, then you've got to find a way to ensure that it is not just turned loose into the wild to fend for itself, because that is inhumane and a bad deal for the native fish in those streams as well. So with that, I'm at my 20 minutes. There's my email address, and I look forward to hearing from at least some of you during the Q&A period later this week. Thanks.